In the quiet early hours of a London morning, a black sedan with tinted windows slowly circled the block around a modest apartment building 3 times. The driver's eyes scanned every shadow, every doorway, every potential hiding spot. Inside the vehicle, encrypted radios crackled with coded messages while high-tech surveillance equipment hummed quietly. This wasn't a scene from a spy thriller, this was the new reality for Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, a man who once walked freely among crowds of thousands, now living under the constant shadow of credible threats that most people could never imagine. What started as a family dispute over royal duties had evolved into something far more sinister and dangerous. The withdrawal of official police protection had left one of the world's most recognizable figures vulnerable in ways that shocked even seasoned security professionals. Behind closed doors, intelligence reports painted a disturbing picture of organized threats from multiple sources: international terrorist groups who saw him as a high-value target, domestic extremists angry about his criticisms of British institutions, and lone wolves obsessed with the royal family's every move. The numbers were staggering and terrifying. Security experts estimated that Prince Harry faced roughly 15 credible threats per month, ranging from detailed assassination plots uncovered by international intelligence agencies to disturbing packages delivered to addresses associated with him. Each threat required investigation, each piece of intelligence demanded analysis, and each day brought new concerns about his safety and that of his family. But this story isn't just about one man's security concerns. It's about the collision between ancient royal traditions and modern realities, between family loyalty and personal independence, between public service and private safety. As Prince Harry took unprecedented legal action against the British government, demanding the right to pay for his own police protection, he exposed the complex web of politics, privilege, and protection that surrounds the British royal family. The stakes couldn't be higher. Every public appearance, every trip to the UK, every moment spent in public became a carefully calculated risk. Professional security teams worked around the clock, analyzing threats, planning routes, and preparing for scenarios that would give most people nightmares. The cost of keeping him safe had reached astronomical levels, but the cost of failing to protect him could be catastrophic not just for him and his family, but for British institutions and international relations. This is the untold story of a prince caught between two worlds: the privileged realm of royal protection and the harsh reality of life without it. It's a story that reveals shocking details about the threats he faces, the desperate measures taken to keep him safe, and the unprecedented legal battle that has left observers stunned and the palace scrambling for answers. The telephone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered with the kind of clinical precision that made its content even more chilling. Prince Harry was in his California office, reviewing security reports from his latest UK visit, when his head of security picked up the encrypted line. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and terrifying in its matter-of-fact delivery. "We've intercepted communications indicating an active plot," the intelligence officer reported. "Multiple individuals, international connections, detailed surveillance of your recent movements. This isn't the usual online chatter, this is operational planning." Harry felt the familiar cold knot form in his stomach, the same sensation he'd experienced countless times during his military service in Afghanistan, but somehow worse because this threat extended to his family. The officer continued with details that couldn't be shared over any line, no matter how secure, but the message was clear: the situation had escalated beyond anything they'd previously encountered. This moment represented the culmination of a security crisis that had been building for months since his decision to step back from royal duties. What many viewed as a family disagreement about roles and responsibilities had created a dangerous gap in his protection that hostile actors were eager to exploit. The withdrawal of automatic police protection hadn't just been a bureaucratic adjustment, it had been a fundamental shift that left him exposed in ways that most people couldn't comprehend. The intelligence report detailed surveillance activities that painted a disturbing picture. Unknown individuals had been photographed near his previous London accommodation, taking detailed notes and measurements. License plates had been recorded, movement patterns analyzed, and security weaknesses identified with military precision. What made this particular threat different was the level of organization and the international scope of the planning. Harry's security team had been tracking concerning developments for weeks. Social media monitoring had detected increased chatter among extremist groups following his recent interviews and public statements. The combination of his high profile, his criticisms of certain institutions, and his reduced official protection had created what security experts called a perfect storm of vulnerability. The threats weren't coming from a single source. Intelligence agencies had identified at least 4 separate groups or individuals with varying motivations but similar objectives. There were international terrorists who saw him as a symbol of Western privilege and military intervention. Domestic extremists angry about his departure from royal duties and his public statements about British institutions. Online conspiracy theorists who blamed him for various perceived social problems. And, perhaps most concerning, individuals with apparent mental health issues who had developed dangerous obsessions with his family. Each threat required different security approaches and countermeasures. The international terrorist connections demanded coordination with multiple intelligence agencies and constant monitoring of communications intercepts. The domestic extremists required surveillance of known groups and analysis of their online activities. The conspiracy theorists needed social media monitoring and investigation of their offline behaviors. The mentally unstable individuals demanded the most unpredictable and comprehensive protection measures. The financial cost of addressing these security needs had become astronomical. Private security firms charged premium rates for the level of protection required by someone with Harry's profile and threat level. A single day of comprehensive protection could cost more than most people earned in a year, and that was for relatively quiet periods without special events or travel. But the personal cost was even higher. Every aspect of Harry's life now required security analysis and planning. Simple activities like taking his children to a park or meeting friends for dinner became complex operations involving advanced teams, route planning, and constant vigilance. The spontaneity and normalcy he'd fought so hard to achieve for his family were being systematically eroded by security necessities. The situation had reached a breaking point where something had to change. Either he would need to dramatically restrict his activities and public engagements, essentially going into hiding, or he would need to find a way to obtain the level of professional protection that could adequately address the threats he faced. The middle ground of partial security measures and calculated risks was no longer sufficient given the escalating nature and sophistication of the dangers. His legal team had been quietly exploring options for months, researching precedents and analyzing the complex web of laws and regulations governing police protection for royal family members. What they discovered was a system that hadn't been designed to handle someone in Harry's unique position, a senior royal who had stepped back from official duties but retained his titles, his public profile, and his association with the monarchy. The legal framework assumed that royal protection was tied directly to official duties and constitutional roles. But Harry's situation didn't fit neatly into any existing category. He wasn't a working royal, but he wasn't a private citizen either. He had legitimate security needs based on real threats, but he didn't have the automatic entitlement to police protection that came with active royal duties. As the threats continued to escalate and the costs of private security mounted, Harry faced an impossible choice. He could retreat from public life entirely, effectively allowing the threats to achieve their goal of silencing him and restricting his activities. Or he could take the unprecedented step of challenging the government's decision to withdraw his police protection, demanding the right to pay for the same level of professional security that had previously been provided automatically. The decision to pursue legal action wasn't made lightly. It meant exposing details of his security situation to public scrutiny, revealing information about threats and vulnerabilities that were normally kept strictly confidential. It meant challenging not just a government policy, but the entire system of royal protection that had evolved over centuries of tradition and precedent. But, as Harry looked at the latest intelligence report, with its clinical descriptions of surveillance activities and operational planning by hostile actors, he realized he had no choice. The safety of his family depended on finding a solution, and if that meant taking on the British government in an unprecedented legal battle, then that's what he would have to do. The phone call that Tuesday morning had been the final straw, but the crisis had been building for much longer. Now it was time to fight back, regardless of how shocking his actions might appear to royal observers and the general public. The classified threat assessment document that landed on the desk of Britain's most senior security officials read like something from a nightmare scenario planning exercise, except every detail had been verified through multiple intelligence sources. Prince Harry, according to the comprehensive analysis, faced what experts classified as Category A threats, the highest level of danger typically reserved for heads of state and senior government ministers during wartime. The document's executive summary was stark in its conclusions. Since stepping back from royal duties, Harry had become what intelligence professionals termed a high-value, soft target, someone whose capture, injury, or death would generate massive international attention but who lacked the comprehensive protection mechanisms of an active working royal. The combination of his global recognition, his military background, his outspoken nature, and his reduced security status had created an unprecedented vulnerability that hostile actors around the world were actively seeking to exploit. What made the threat assessment particularly alarming was its international scope. Intelligence agencies from 6 different countries had contributed information, painting a picture of coordinated interest from various hostile actors. The threats weren't random or opportunistic, they showed signs of careful planning, resource allocation, and sophisticated intelligence gathering that suggested state-level or well-funded organizational backing. The assessment detailed surveillance activities that had been ongoing for months without Harry's knowledge. Sophisticated tracking of his movements using both human assets and electronic surveillance had created detailed patterns of his routines, preferences, and security vulnerabilities. License plate readers had captured information about vehicles in his vicinity. Cell phone tracking had identified individuals who appeared repeatedly in his proximity across different locations and time periods. Perhaps most disturbing were the communications intercepts that revealed the level of detailed planning being undertaken by hostile actors. Conversations captured through various intelligence methods discussed everything from his children's school schedules to the security arrangements at his various residences. The depth of information available to potential threats was far beyond what any private citizen should have to face, yet it reflected the reality of targeting someone with Harry's profile. The psychological profile section of the assessment was equally troubling. Intelligence analysts had identified multiple categories of individuals who posed potential threats, each requiring different security approaches. There were political extremists who viewed him as a symbol of institutional privilege and Western military intervention. Religious fundamentalists who saw him as a legitimate target based on his military service and royal connections. Conspiracy theorists who blamed him for various perceived social problems and international conflicts. But, perhaps most concerning were the individuals classified as suffering from various forms of mental illness or personality disorders. These cases were unpredictable and often involved elaborate fantasy scenarios where harming Harry was seen as achieving some greater purpose or gaining attention for their causes. Unlike politically motivated threats that often followed predictable patterns, these individuals could strike at any time for reasons that made sense only to them. The assessment included detailed case studies of specific threats that had been neutralized or disrupted. One case involved an individual who had traveled from continental Europe with detailed plans for an attack during Harry's last public appearance in London. Another described a domestic plot involving multiple individuals who had conducted months of surveillance and planning before being detected through electronic communications monitoring. Each case revealed the sophisticated level of planning and resources being devoted to potential attacks. These weren't desperate individuals acting on impulse, they were organized, funded, and equipped with professional-level intelligence and planning capabilities. The fact that several plots had been successfully disrupted was reassuring, but the assessment noted that intelligence agencies could only detect and prevent a percentage of potential threats. The geographic scope of the threats was particularly challenging for security planning. Unlike traditional protection scenarios where threats might come from specific regions or groups, Harry faced potential dangers wherever he traveled. Intelligence reports documented concerning activities in virtually every major city he might visit, from London and New York to small towns where he might make charitable appearances. The assessment's financial analysis revealed the staggering cost of adequately protecting someone facing this level of threat. Professional security teams estimated that comprehensive protection would require a minimum of 12 trained personnel working in rotation, specialized equipment including armored vehicles and communication systems, advanced security teams for any location he planned to visit, and 24-hour monitoring and analysis capabilities. The annual cost of such protection was calculated to exceed several £1 million, not including special circumstances like international travel or high-risk public appearances. This level of expenditure was typically justified only for senior government officials or individuals whose safety was considered essential to national security interests. But, the assessment also noted the potential consequences of inadequate protection. Any successful attack on Harry would create international headlines, potentially damage British diplomatic relationships, and raise serious questions about the government's duty of care toward royal family members. The reputational and political costs of a security failure could far exceed the financial investment required for adequate protection. Intelligence officials were particularly concerned about the precedent that Harry's situation might set for other members of the royal family who might step back from official duties in the future. If adequate security couldn't be provided for someone in his position, it might discourage other royals from pursuing independent lives or create additional vulnerabilities throughout the extended royal family. The assessment's conclusions were unambiguous. Harry faced genuine, serious, and ongoing threats that required professional-level protection capabilities. The decision to withdraw automatic police protection had created a dangerous gap that needed to be addressed through some combination of government support, private security arrangements, or fundamental changes to how royal protection was structured and funded. As senior security officials reviewed the document's findings, they realized that Harry's legal challenge wasn't just about one individual's security needs, it was about addressing a systematic gap in how Britain protected royal family members who chose to step back from official duties while maintaining their public profiles and continued exposure to international threats. The threat assessment made clear that this wasn't a problem that would resolve itself over time. If anything, the threats were likely to increase as Harry's public profile remained high and his reduced protection status became more widely known among hostile actors around the world. The preliminary hearing in Harry's unprecedented legal challenge took place in a nondescript courtroom that belied the historic nature of the proceedings. For the first time in modern British history, a member of the royal family was directly challenging the government's authority to determine his security arrangements, creating legal precedents that would reshape the relationship between the monarchy, the state, and personal safety for generations to come. Harry's legal team had spent months crafting arguments that navigated the complex intersection of constitutional law, human rights legislation, and national security considerations. Their central contention was that the decision to withdraw police protection had been made without proper consideration of the ongoing threats he faced or his willingness to pay for such protection himself. They argued that denying him the option to purchase police protection, even at full cost, violated his fundamental rights to life and security. The government's response revealed the complexity of the issues at stake. Their lawyers argued that police protection wasn't a service that could be purchased like private security, but rather a limited public resource that had to be allocated based on constitutional duties and national security priorities. They contended that allowing royals to buy police protection would create dangerous precedents and potentially compromise the independence and neutrality of law enforcement agencies. Behind the legal arguments lay a deeper constitutional question that had never been definitively resolved. What obligations did the British state have toward royal family members who stepped back from official duties but retained their titles, their public profiles, and their exposure to threats? The existing legal framework had evolved over centuries to address traditional royal roles, but it provided little guidance for Harry's unprecedented situation. The case files contained shocking revelations about the threat environment that Harry faced daily. Intelligence briefings submitted as evidence detailed specific plots that had been disrupted, surveillance activities that had been detected, and security incidents that had been successfully prevented. The cumulative picture painted by these documents was of someone living under siege from multiple hostile actors with varying motivations and capabilities. One particularly disturbing piece of evidence involved encrypted communications that had been intercepted between individuals planning what appeared to be a coordinated attack during Harry's next visit to the UK. The communications revealed detailed knowledge of his previous travel patterns, security arrangements, and personal routines that could only have been gathered through extensive surveillance and intelligence gathering. The legal proceedings also exposed the financial realities of royal protection. Government lawyers revealed for the first time the actual costs of providing comprehensive security for senior royals, figures that shocked even experienced legal observers. The annual cost of protecting working royals was calculated in millions of pounds per individual, covering everything from personal protection officers and armored vehicles to advanced security teams and intelligence analysis. Harry's willingness to pay these costs himself removed one of the government's primary objections to providing protection. His legal team argued that if he was prepared to reimburse the government for the full cost of police protection, there was no financial justification for denying him access to the same professional capabilities that had previously kept him safe. The government's counter-arguments revealed deeper concerns about precedent and principle. They worried that allowing one royal to purchase police protection could lead to demands from other family members, celebrities, or wealthy individuals who faced security threats. They argued that police resources had to be allocated based on public duty and constitutional necessity, not private ability to pay. But Harry's lawyers had anticipated these objections and crafted responses that highlighted the unique aspects of his situation. They noted that he wasn't seeking protection as a celebrity or private citizen, but as someone who retained his royal title, his constitutional position in the line of succession, and his ongoing exposure to threats directly related to his royal status and military service. The intelligence evidence presented to the court revealed the international dimension of the threats Harry faced. Security agencies from multiple countries had provided information about hostile actors who had specifically targeted him based on his royal connections and military background. These weren't generic celebrity stalkers or random criminals, they were organized groups and individuals who saw him as a high-value target representing British institutions and Western military forces. Legal experts following the case noted its potential implications far beyond Harry's individual circumstances. The court's decision would establish precedents for how the British state balanced royal privileges with personal independence, how it allocated security resources among family members with varying levels of official duties, and how it addressed the evolving nature of modern threats against public figures. The proceedings also revealed tensions within the royal family about Harry's legal challenge. While no working royals testified or submitted statements, legal filings referenced communications that suggested concerns about how the case might affect broader royal security arrangements. There were worries that revealing too much information about protection methods and threat levels could compromise the safety of other family members. The human cost of the security situation was documented through witness statements from Harry's protection team and family members. These statements described the constant vigilance required to keep him safe, the restrictions on normal activities that security concerns imposed, and the psychological stress of living under continuous threat assessment and protection protocols. Perhaps most powerfully, the legal filings included Harry's own statement about the impact of inadequate security on his family life. He described the impossibility of providing his children with normal experiences while managing serious security threats through private means alone. He detailed the burden of making every decision through the lens of potential security implications and the exhausting reality of constant vigilance and protection planning. The government's evidence revealed their own concerns about Harry's security situation. Internal communications showed that security officials were genuinely worried about his safety but felt constrained by legal and procedural limitations on how they could provide assistance. There was clear recognition that he faced legitimate threats that required professional-level protection capabilities. As the legal battle intensified, both sides recognized that they were fighting over much more than one individual's security arrangements. The case would establish fundamental principles about royal autonomy, state obligations, and the evolving relationship between tradition and modern security realities that would influence British constitutional arrangements for decades to come. The court's eventual decision would either validate Harry's unprecedented challenge to royal security protocols or establish that traditional constitutional arrangements took precedence over individual security needs, regardless of the threats involved or the individual's willingness to pay for protection. The emergency meeting convened at Buckingham Palace on a Wednesday afternoon brought together the most senior figures in the royal household, government security officials, and legal advisors in a session that would be remembered as one of the most consequential gatherings in modern royal history. The agenda was simple but explosive: how to respond to Prince Harry's legal challenge and the shocking security revelations it had brought to public attention. The Lord Chamberlain opened the meeting with a briefing that painted a grim picture of the situation's impact on the entire royal family. Harry's legal case had exposed sensitive information about royal protection methods, threat levels, and security vulnerabilities that had never been intended for public disclosure. Intelligence officials were reporting increased chatter among hostile actors who were studying the court filings for insights into royal security arrangements. What had started as a dispute over one individual's protection had evolved into a potential security crisis affecting the entire royal family. The detailed threat assessments presented in court had revealed operational information that hostile actors could use to plan attacks against any royal family member. Security protocols developed over decades were being scrutinized in public proceedings that made them less effective for everyone under royal protection. The Queen's private secretary presented analysis of the constitutional implications that extended far beyond security concerns. Harry's legal challenge was forcing fundamental questions about the monarchy's relationship with the state, the balance between royal privilege and personal autonomy, and the evolving nature of royal duties in the modern era. Legal scholars were already debating whether the case would establish precedents that could reshape the constitutional monarchy for future generations. Behind closed doors, family members were grappling with the personal dimensions of the crisis. The Royal Protection Unit reported increased threat levels against other senior royals, apparently triggered by the publicity surrounding Harry's case and the security information it had revealed. What had been intended to secure Harry's safety was potentially endangering his relatives, creating a tragic irony that nobody had anticipated. The financial implications were staggering and extended throughout the royal household's operations. Security officials presented cost projections showing that if Harry's legal challenge succeeded, it could establish precedents requiring similar protection levels for other family members who might step back from official duties in the future. The potential costs of protecting an expanding group of semi-independent royals could overwhelm existing security budgets. More concerning was intelligence analysis showing that hostile actors were already adapting their planning based on information revealed in the legal proceedings. Communications intercepts indicated that terrorist groups and extremist organizations were studying the court documents to better understand royal security weaknesses and protection protocols. The very act of seeking better protection was potentially making everyone less safe. The government's security briefing revealed the broader implications of Harry's case for national security planning. Royal protection wasn't just about keeping individual family members safe, it was part of a comprehensive approach to protecting British institutions and maintaining international relationships. Successful attacks against any royal family member could have diplomatic consequences that extended far beyond personal tragedy. Palace officials were particularly concerned about the precedent implications of Harry's legal challenge. If successful, it could encourage other family members to pursue independent lives while demanding continued state protection. The traditional model of royal duties being tied to royal privileges could be fundamentally altered, creating a new category of semi-independent royals with continued claims on state resources. The intelligence briefing included disturbing details about how hostile actors were responding to the increased publicity around royal security issues. Social media monitoring had detected increased activity among extremist groups discussing potential attacks against royal targets. Online conspiracy communities were sharing detailed analysis of the court documents, looking for operational intelligence that could be used for harmful purposes. Perhaps most concerning was evidence that foreign intelligence services were taking increased interest in British royal security arrangements. Communications intercepts suggested that several hostile nations were studying the legal proceedings to gather intelligence about protection methods and vulnerabilities that could be exploited for their own purposes. What should have been a domestic legal matter was becoming an international security concern. The palace's media advisors presented analysis showing how the case was affecting public perception of the royal family. Opinion polling revealed significant public confusion about royal roles, responsibilities, and entitlements. Many people couldn't understand why someone who had stepped back from royal duties would continue to receive state protection, while others were sympathetic to Harry's security concerns and critical of the government's response. Legal advisors warned that the case was exposing fundamental contradictions in how the modern monarchy operated. The traditional assumption that royal privileges were directly tied to royal duties was being challenged by the reality of modern threats that didn't recognize such distinctions. Hostile actors targeted royals based on their status and profile, not their current level of official duties. The meeting also addressed the international dimensions of the crisis. Diplomatic officials reported increased concerns from allied nations about the security of their own royal families and heads of state during visits to Britain. If the British government couldn't adequately protect its own royal family members, questions were being raised about security arrangements for foreign dignitaries. Security officials presented worst-case scenario planning that painted a disturbing picture of potential consequences. If Harry's reduced protection led to a successful attack, it could trigger a security review that might require fundamental changes to how all royals lived and worked. The freedom and accessibility that had made the British royal family popular with the public could be permanently compromised. The financial analysis went beyond direct protection costs to include broader implications for royal operations. Increased security concerns were already affecting the planning of public engagements, charitable activities, and international travel for all family members. The economic value of royal activities to British tourism and trade could be significantly reduced if security concerns limited public access and international engagements. Palace advisors were also grappling with the family dynamics of the situation. Harry's legal challenge had created divisions within the royal family about how to balance individual security needs with collective interests. Some family members privately supported his right to adequate protection, while others worried about the precedent effects and the exposure of sensitive security information. The meeting concluded with recognition that there were no easy solutions to the crisis Harry's legal challenge had created. Any decision would establish precedents affecting the entire royal family for generations to come. The security revelations had already changed the threat environment for everyone under royal protection, and the legal proceedings were forcing fundamental questions about the monarchy's relationship with the modern state. As the senior officials filed out of the palace after hours of intense discussion, they understood that they were dealing with more than a security dispute. They were witnessing the potential transformation of the British monarchy's relationship with the state and the public, driven by the unprecedented security challenges of the modern era. 6 months after Prince Harry's shocking legal victory established his right to purchase police protection, the reverberations of his unprecedented challenge continued to reshape British royal security, constitutional law, and the monarchy's relationship with the modern state. The Court of Appeal's landmark decision had created a new category of royal protection that nobody had anticipated, fundamentally altering how the British government approached the security of family members who chose independence while retaining their royal status. The immediate aftermath of the court's decision revealed the complexity of implementing a ruling that had no historical precedent. Harry became the first royal family member in British history to pay directly for police protection, creating administrative and operational challenges that required months of negotiation between his legal team, government security officials, and royal household administrators. The arrangement established a new model that other constitutional monarchies around the world were studying for potential application to their own situations. The financial arrangements alone required unprecedented transparency about royal security costs. For the first time in British history, detailed breakdowns of protection expenses were made public through the legal proceedings, revealing that comprehensive security for someone of Harry's profile and threat level cost approximately £4 million annually. The figure included not just personal protection officers, but armored vehicles, communication systems, advanced security teams, intelligence analysis, and emergency response capabilities. Harry's willingness to pay these extraordinary costs himself had removed the government's primary objection to providing protection, but it created new questions about equity and precedent. Legal scholars debated whether other wealthy individuals facing serious security threats could demand similar access to police protection services, regardless of their status or constitutional role. The government maintained that Harry's situation was unique due to his royal position and the specific nature of the threats he faced. The intelligence picture following the court case revealed both successes and new challenges in managing Harry's security situation. Several planned attacks had been successfully disrupted using the enhanced protection arrangements, validating the court's decision and demonstrating the effectiveness of professional police protection. However, the publicity surrounding the legal proceedings had also attracted new threats from individuals and groups who previously hadn't focused on royal targets. Security officials reported a measurable increase in threat-related communications targeting the royal family following the extensive media coverage of Harry's case. Social media monitoring detected increased activity among extremist groups discussing royal security arrangements, with some using information revealed in the court proceedings to develop more sophisticated attack planning. The very success of Harry's legal challenge had inadvertently provided hostile actors with operational intelligence about royal protection methods. The international dimension of Harry's security situation had evolved significantly since the court's decision. Foreign intelligence agencies were now sharing more detailed information about threats against him, recognizing that his enhanced protection status made him a more credible target for international hostile actors. Diplomatic security arrangements had been upgraded for his international travel, reflecting the global nature of the threats he continued to face. The precedent implications of Harry's case were beginning to manifest in unexpected ways. Two other minor royals had approached government officials about their own security arrangements, citing the precedent established by Harry's successful challenge. While neither faced threats comparable to his situation, the legal framework he had established provided a potential pathway for other family members to seek enhanced protection if circumstances warranted. The cost-benefit analysis of Harry's protection arrangement had become a subject of ongoing government review. While the direct costs were covered by Harry himself, the indirect costs to police resources, intelligence services, and security planning continued to be borne by the state. Government officials were studying whether these broader security costs should be factored into future protection arrangements for other royals who might choose similar paths. The operational reality of Harry's enhanced security had required significant adjustments to his lifestyle and public activities. While he was now safer than he had been since leaving official royal duties, the comprehensive protection required careful planning and coordination that limited spontaneous activities and public accessibility. The balance between security and normal life remained a constant challenge that required ongoing negotiation between protection teams and personal preferences. The broader royal family had adapted to the new security environment created by Harry's case in various ways. Some family members had upgraded their own protection arrangements, while others had modified their public activities and travel patterns to account for the changed threat environment. The traditional assumption that royal security could be managed through discreet, established protocols had been replaced by recognition that modern threats required more flexible and responsive approaches. The legal framework established by Harry's case was being studied by constitutional experts and security officials in other countries facing similar challenges. Several European monarchies had reached out to British officials seeking guidance on how to handle situations where royal family members wanted to step back from official duties while maintaining adequate security. The British model was becoming an international reference point for balancing royal independence with security necessities. The public perception of Harry's security situation had evolved considerably since the initial controversy over his legal challenge. Opinion polling showed increased understanding of the serious threats he faced and support for his right to purchase adequate protection. The revelation of specific plots against him had shifted public debate from questions about royal privilege to recognition of legitimate security needs that transcended traditional constitutional arrangements. The technological aspects of Harry's enhanced protection had required significant innovation and adaptation. New communication systems, surveillance methods, and threat assessment capabilities had been developed specifically for his unique situation. These technological advances were being applied more broadly to improve protection for other royals and high-risk individuals, creating unexpected benefits from the initial crisis. As the first anniversary of Harry's court victory approached, security officials were conducting comprehensive reviews of the arrangement's effectiveness and lessons learned. The data showed clear success in threat prevention and disruption, but also revealed the ongoing challenges of protecting someone who insisted on maintaining an active public life while facing serious international threats. The long-term implications of Harry's precedent-setting case were still unfolding, but it was clear that he had fundamentally altered the relationship between royal status, personal independence, and state security obligations. His shocking legal victory had created a new model for managing royal security in the modern era, one that other constitutional monarchies and high-profile individuals around the world were studying and adapting to their own circumstances. The story that began with a desperate fight for adequate protection had evolved into a landmark case that would influence royal security, constitutional law, and the balance between personal freedom and state obligations for generations to come. Harry's unprecedented challenge had not only secured his own safety but had created new frameworks for protecting royal family members who chose to forge independent paths in an increasingly dangerous world. The encrypted phone buzzed at exactly 6:47 a.m. Pacific Time, cutting through the morning silence of Prince Harry's Montecito home like a blade. He was already awake, as he had been most nights recently, standing by the bulletproof windows of his study and watching the sunrise paint the California hills in shades of gold and amber. The display showed only a series of numbers that meant nothing to most people but everything to him. It was his former commanding officer from the Special Air Service, now working in private intelligence. "Harry, we need to talk. Now." The voice was clipped, urgent, stripped of any pleasantries. Colonel James Mitchell had never been one for small talk, but this morning his tone carried a weight that made Harry's blood run cold. "What's happening, James?" "We've got multiple intercepts from the past 48 hours. 3 separate cells, 2 different countries, all talking about the same target." This isn't chatter anymore. We're looking at active operational planning with timelines, resources, and what appears to be inside information about your security arrangements." Harry sank into his leather chair, the same one where he'd made the decision to step back from royal duties 2 years earlier. Back then, his biggest worry had been disappointing his grandmother and dealing with negative press coverage. Now he was facing the reality that multiple groups of people were actively planning to harm or kill him and, potentially, his family. How credible? Harry asked, though he already knew the answer from James's tone. "Scale of 1 to 10? This is a 12. We're not talking about keyboard warriors or lone wolves anymore. These are organized groups with funding, equipment, and intelligence capabilities. They know things about your movements that they shouldn't know. They have details about your security protocols that suggest either surveillance or insider information." The conversation continued for 23 minutes, each detail more alarming than the last. By the time Harry hung up, he understood that his life had changed fundamentally and irreversibly. The theoretical dangers that came with being a high-profile royal had become immediate, credible, and sophisticated threats that required responses far beyond anything his current security arrangements could provide. The warning call represented the culmination of a security nightmare that had been building like a storm system for 18 months. What the media portrayed as a simple family disagreement about royal duties had created something far more dangerous, a protection gap that hostile actors around the world had noticed and were now actively exploiting. When the Home Office withdrew his automatic police protection in April of the previous year, they had treated it as a routine administrative adjustment. Harry now understood it had been a potentially fatal miscalculation. The decision to remove his protection had been based on the assumption that stepping back from royal duties meant stepping back from royal-level threats. But the reality was exactly the opposite. His criticism of British institutions, his military background, his ongoing high profile, and his outspoken nature had actually increased his value as a target while simultaneously reducing his protection. It was a perfect storm that intelligence agencies were now warning had attracted attention from the most dangerous actors on the planet. Within hours of James's call, Harry was reviewing intelligence reports that read like something from a terrorism thriller, except every word was verified and every threat was real. The surveillance activities documented in the files painted a picture of professional-level intelligence gathering that went far beyond anything he had experienced during his military service. Unknown operatives had been photographed using long-range cameras outside his children's school in California, taking detailed notes about arrival and departure times, security procedures, and staff routines. The photos, captured by counter-surveillance teams, showed individuals with military-grade equipment and tactical awareness that suggested extensive training and significant financial backing. License plate readers had captured the same vehicles appearing repeatedly near locations Harry frequented, sometimes weeks apart but always in positions that allowed observation of his movements and security arrangements. The pattern analysis showed a level of coordination and patience that intelligence experts associated with state-sponsored or highly organized criminal operations. Perhaps most disturbing was evidence of electronic surveillance that had apparently been ongoing for months without detection. Cell phone tracking data suggested that his communications were being monitored, his location was being tracked in real time, and his digital footprint was being analyzed to predict his future activities and identify security vulnerabilities. The threat matrix his security team had been tracking showed an escalation pattern that kept intelligence analysts awake at night. Social media monitoring had detected a 300% increase in hostile communications targeting Harry following his most recent television interview. But this wasn't random internet anger. Sophisticated analysis revealed coordination between accounts, shared talking points, and increasing specificity in the threats being discussed. The combination of Harry's military service record, his criticism of certain government policies, his high-profile media appearances, and his reduced official protection had created what counterterrorism experts call a convergence scenario. Multiple hostile actors with different motivations were independently targeting the same individual, creating a threat environment that was unprecedented in its complexity and danger level. The intelligence briefing identified 7 distinct threat categories, each requiring different security approaches and each presenting unique challenges for protection planning. International terrorist organizations saw Harry as a high-value target representing British military forces and Western intervention in Muslim countries. His 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan, widely publicized at the time, had made him a symbol of Western military presence that certain groups wanted to strike back against. Domestic extremist movements viewed him as a traitor to British traditions and values, particularly angry about his criticisms of media coverage and his decision to leave the country. Online forums monitored by security agencies showed increasing radicalization among individuals who blamed Harry for undermining British institutions and bringing negative attention to the royal family. Far-right conspiracy networks had woven elaborate theories around Harry and his wife, portraying them as threats to traditional British society and targets for action by patriotic individuals. The combination of racial undertones, anti-establishment sentiment, and conspiracy thinking had created a particularly volatile mixture of hatred and potential violence. International criminal organizations were reportedly interested in Harry as a potential kidnapping target, viewing him as someone whose capture would generate enormous ransom demands and international attention. Intelligence agencies had intercepted communications suggesting that several organized crime groups were studying his security arrangements and daily routines. State-sponsored actors from hostile nations were apparently conducting intelligence-gathering operations focused on Harry, potentially as part of broader efforts to embarrass the British government or gather information about royal protection methods. The sophistication of some surveillance activities suggested resources and capabilities beyond what criminal or terrorist groups typically possessed. Religious extremist groups across multiple faiths had identified Harry as a target based on various grievances related to his military service, his royal status, and his public statements on religious and social issues. The diversity of religious motivations meant that threat indicators and attack methods could vary widely depending on which group might attempt action. Perhaps most unpredictably dangerous were the individuals classified as suffering from various mental health conditions who had developed obsessions with Harry and his family. These cases often involved elaborate fantasy scenarios and could escalate to violence with little warning or apparent logic. Unlike ideologically motivated threats that often followed predictable patterns, these individuals could strike at any time for reasons that made sense only to them. The cost analysis of addressing these multifaceted security threats had reached numbers that shocked even Harry, despite his understanding of high-end security expenses. Professional threat assessment consultants estimated that adequate protection would require a minimum annual budget of £4.7 million, not including special circumstances like international travel, high-risk public appearances, or emergency response situations. The baseline protection package included 12 highly trained close protection officers working in rotating shifts to provide 24-hour coverage. Each officer required specialized training in counter-terrorism, medical emergency response, tactical driving, and threat recognition. Their salaries alone exceeded £800,000 annually, before considering equipment, training updates, and operational expenses. Armored transportation was another major expense category. The vehicles required for someone facing Harry's level of threats weren't luxury cars with some additional protection, they were essentially mobile fortresses costing more than £500,000 each. Multiple vehicles were necessary to provide backup options and prevent predictable travel patterns that hostile actors could exploit. Communication and surveillance equipment represented a constantly evolving expense as security teams tried to stay ahead of increasingly sophisticated threats. Encrypted communication systems, electronic surveillance detection equipment, and threat monitoring technologies required regular updates and replacement as hostile actors developed countermeasures. Advanced security operations for any location Harry planned to visit involved teams of specialists who would arrive days ahead of time to assess threats, coordinate with local law enforcement, plan evacuation routes, and establish secure perimeters. A single public appearance could require advance work costing tens of thousands of pounds, depending on the location and expected attendance. Intelligence gathering and analysis were perhaps the most crucial and expensive aspects of comprehensive protection. Professional intelligence services charged premium rates for monitoring communications, analyzing threats, conducting background checks on individuals in Harry's vicinity, and providing early warning of potential attacks. This around-the-clock intelligence support was essential but incredibly expensive. Emergency medical capabilities had to be factored into any comprehensive protection plan. Harry's threat level required immediate access to trauma medical care, which meant having qualified paramedics as part of his protection team and ensuring that medical evacuation capabilities were available wherever he traveled. International coordination added another layer of complexity and expense. When Harry traveled outside the United States, his protection team had to work with foreign intelligence agencies, local law enforcement, and embassy security personnel. These international operations required specialized planning, additional personnel, and diplomatic coordination that significantly increased costs. The human cost of living under this level of security was becoming unbearable for Harry's entire family. Every decision, from grocery shopping to children's playdates, required security analysis and advance planning. Simple activities that most families took for granted had become complex logistical operations involving multiple personnel, route planning, and constant threat assessment. Harry's wife found herself essentially under house arrest during periods when threat levels were elevated. School pickup and drop-off had become military-style operations with advance teams, multiple vehicles, and security sweeps of the surrounding areas. The children's activities were limited to pre-screened locations with adequate security infrastructure, eliminating many normal childhood experiences. The psychological impact on the family was profound and growing worse with each passing month. Harry's military training had prepared him for personal danger, but watching his children grow up under constant security restrictions was heartbreaking. His wife had never signed up for this level of threat and surveillance when she married into the royal family, and the stress was taking an obvious toll on her health and well-being. Sleep had become elusive for everyone in the household. Security protocols required regular movement between safe rooms during the night based on threat assessments and intelligence updates. The children had adapted with remarkable resilience, but Harry worried about the long-term psychological effects of growing up in what essentially amounted to a state of siege. Every public appearance or charitable activity Harry wanted to pursue required extensive security planning that often cost more than the event itself would raise for charity. The irony wasn't lost on him, his efforts to continue meaningful work were being undermined by security costs that consumed resources he wanted to dedicate to helping others. The constant presence of security personnel, while necessary, had changed the fundamental nature of family life. Private conversations were difficult when protection officers needed to be within earshot at all times. Family outings required security advances that eliminated spontaneity and natural interaction. Even the children's friends and their families had to undergo background checks before playdates could be arranged. The breaking point came 3 weeks later during what should have been a routine trip to his son's soccer practice. Harry was sitting in his armored vehicle, watching through bulletproof glass as his child played with teammates, when his security chief received an urgent communication through his earpiece. Within seconds, the entire protection detail was moving with the practiced efficiency of a military operation. "We need to leave now." The words were spoken calmly, but Harry recognized the tone from his military days. This wasn't a drill or a precautionary measure, this was an active threat requiring immediate action. As they drove away from the soccer field, Harry's son asking confused questions about why they had to leave early, Harry made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't continue living this way, couldn't subject his family to this level of constant fear and restriction, couldn't accept that his children would grow up as prisoners in their own lives simply because the British government had decided that stepping back from royal duties meant forfeiting adequate protection. The intelligence briefing later that evening revealed that a credible threat had been detected involving individuals who had been conducting surveillance of the soccer practice location for several days. Electronic intercepts had captured communications about weapons procurement and timing discussions that suggested an imminent attack was being planned. Only the vigilance of Harry's security team and their connections to intelligence agencies had prevented what could have been a catastrophic incident. That night, as Harry tucked his children into bed and tried to answer their questions about why they had to leave soccer practice early, he realized that private security measures, no matter how expensive or comprehensive, would never be sufficient to address the level of threats he faced. The sophistication and resources of the hostile actors targeting him required law enforcement capabilities, intelligence agency coordination, and government-level response mechanisms that only official police protection could provide. His legal team had been quietly researching options for months, analyzing precedents and exploring the complex web of laws and regulations governing royal protection. What they had discovered was a system that assumed royal family members would either maintain their official duties and receive automatic protection, or step away from royal life entirely and accept the security consequences. Harry's situation, maintaining his royal status and public profile while stepping back from official duties, didn't fit neatly into existing legal frameworks. The research had revealed some encouraging precedents in human rights law. Previous cases had established principles about the state's obligation to protect individuals facing serious threats, particularly when those threats were related to their public roles or official activities. Harry's military service and continued royal status could potentially establish grounds for arguing that the government had ongoing obligations to ensure his safety. But pursuing legal action would be unprecedented in its scope and implications. No royal family member in British history had directly sued the government over security arrangements. The case would inevitably expose sensitive information about royal protection methods, threat assessments, and intelligence capabilities that were normally kept strictly confidential. The potential for compromising ongoing security operations was a serious concern that had to be weighed against the urgent need for adequate protection. However, the alternative, continuing to live with inadequate protection while serious threats escalated, was no longer acceptable. Harry's children deserved the chance to grow up with reasonable safety and some measure of normal childhood experiences. His wife deserved to pursue her own interests and activities without constant fear for her family's security. And Harry himself needed to be able to continue his charitable work and public advocacy without putting everyone he cared about at unacceptable risk. The decision to file a lawsuit was ultimately about more than just security arrangements. It was about establishing the principle that stepping back from official royal duties shouldn't mean accepting inadequate protection against serious threats. If the British government couldn't find a way to provide adequate security for royal family members who chose independent paths, then the entire concept of modern royal autonomy would need fundamental reconsideration. As Harry reviewed the legal documents that would launch his unprecedented challenge to the royal protection system, he understood that he was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. The lawsuit would inevitably create controversy, expose family tensions, and potentially damage relationships that had already been strained by his decision to step back from royal duties. But, looking at the latest threat assessment, with its clinical descriptions of surveillance activities and operational planning by hostile actors, Harry knew he had no choice. The safety of his family had to take precedence over diplomatic considerations, family harmony, or public relations concerns. If that meant taking on the British government in a legal battle that would shock royal observers around the world, then that was exactly what he was prepared to do. The encrypted phone call that had started this nightmare 3 weeks earlier had been the final warning. The near miss at the soccer practice had been the final straw. Now it was time to fight back through the legal system, regardless of how unprecedented and controversial his actions might appear to those who had never faced the daily reality of living under serious, credible, and escalating threats to their family's safety. Harry picked up his secure phone and dialed his lead attorney. It was time to file the lawsuit that would change royal protection forever.